Shampa Sircar Das is an eminent artist on the Indian art scale. Her paintings are a study in the power of the spirit within the domain of human and earthly ancestry. The rich Indian cultural heritage and Indian philosophy inspire Shampa's works. She has 20 solo shows to her credit and has exhibited nationally and internationally. Welcome, Shampa, to the sets of Chaibrary.
Thank you, Jyoti. Thank you for having me.
Shampa, it's absolutely amazing that you have about 20 solo shows to your credit and you have a huge body of work. Could you tell us about how this journey in art began?
Jyoti, actually, I think so. I'm one of the artists in my family. Most of them are from different vocations and definitely not from art. But art, I have always been surrounded by art because being in a Bengali family, we've had the Durga Puja as the main ceremony which happens. And also my grandparents, my grandmother, we always had a joint family. So, like things like the Alpana, and the decorations that happen in the Durga Puja, idol making. We used to come back from school and idol making was something we were always, following up. So art has been a very, very integral part of my growing up years, and I was always interested in drawing and all. And when I look back now in school, I was a science student, but when I look back, I think art was something that led me to science because I was very much interested in botany, in biology, because we used to make those practical files. So I think so because of that I took up science, and I was doing my botany honors, and that's when one of my professors, you must be knowing Art Chowdhury, he told my father that why doesn't Shampa go into art, and that's when I gave the art college exam and I qualified. But in school also, prior to that, I've been constantly participating in art competitions and other such things. So that's how my journey in art began when I did my B.F.A and my M.F.A in art.
So you were basically a science student.
Yes, I was a science student because of the drawings and other things like I told you. So I was very much interested in botany, zoology and other things, not so much in physics and chemistry. But yes, I was doing my botany honors. And I left that and I applied for the College of Art.
And perhaps your absolutely deep interest and sustained interest in Indian philosophy and aesthetics and the way that you incorporate them in your work.
Yes.
It could be obviously because you were in a school which had so much focus
Yes.
on Indian philosophy.
Yes.
So I can see that in your works right from the beginning, there has been a lot of focus on Indian aesthetics and philosophy. Could you talk about that?
Like you mentioned, in school, definitely, because I come from such a school of Aurobindo Ashram. In every day, we used to have the Sanskrit shlokas, we used to have English recitations, Hindi recitation. I was good at recitation and I used to be a part of it. We were very much exposed to meditation. At that point of time, we really didn't understand because it used to be a little irritating, like every day you're sitting in the school assembly and meditating for a certain hours. But I think so my journey of art started from there. And we had an excellent teacher in school, U. Bose. He's still there, sir is still there. And I would say he was someone who motivated us. So he was someone who never used to guide you, that you should do the work like this. But as an example, we would look at him working, and that's how we would also be initiated. And then in college, of course, College of Art, I was very privileged to have good teachers. And in fact, over there also, nobody would teach you anything. But we had professors who were doing their own work, who were very much in the field, who were working in the field, and that is how we learned. For example, Art Chowdhury. So I remember when we were in painting in college, never ever has sir come to the class and taught us anything. He used to be in his room, he used to paint, and we used to go there and see him paint. And that used to be a learning. Like Jay sir was there, Jay Jarotia sir. So we used to see him work in his studio. We used to see Jagdish De sir work in his studio, or Anupam Sood ma'am doing her prints, etching prints. So that used to be our learning. So we were in our class and these teachers around us used to have shows. We used to go to their shows. So that used to be a very, very big kind of a learning for us because they were practically working in the field.
So in college you were exposed to various genres of art.
Yes,
How
yes.
did you come to your particular genre, your calling, which is your painting, particularly acrylics.
Yeah. So I did my master's also. And you know what? College is a different life. When you come out of college, it's a different world out here. And it's a world where you again feel very left alone, because in college you're very protected under the guidance of your teachers and all. But having said that, like I told you from beginning, there has always been a connect with Indian philosophy, Indian literature, Indian aesthetics, Indian ethos due to my schooling. And also when I came to college again, I had teachers who were also drawing the inspiration from Indian art or Indian philosophy. So once I came out of college, I wanted to work, but there was a gap because I was not able to work as an artist on a regular basis. But I think so all those 3 or 4 years which I couldn't work, I was being exposed in a different way. I was in an advertising firm. I was the creative director there. Many people are not aware of it. Because once you're out of college, you want to earn your living, you want to start your life. You don't want to be dependent on your parents. And art is not a very easy profession. So I was working as a creative head, and I was doing ads for different companies. And I used to work in my free time. Then I realized that I am not able to do justice to my work, because this profession as an ad creative director, that was consuming all my time. So I left that and I started in a government school. I taught in a government school for about 4 years. The only reason why I taught, because I cleared the government exam firstly, and a government job was secure. I was getting the payment, and I was getting my funding for my art from there. And also it was a morning shift, so I was free in the afternoon to pursue my work. But in 4 years I realized that even if I was liking it, I'm not doing justice to my work, because you cannot keep your feet on two boats, and it has to be with full dedication that I need to continue my art practice. So I resigned, and I just left the government job. And many people were after me that, why are you leaving a government job? You're getting so well paid, and the pay commission is coming, your salary will be increased and all. I said, no, this is not what I want to do with my life. And thereafter I started working on my own. That time I was not traveling, but later on I started traveling. The first time I traveled outside was to Ladakh. So I went there as a tourist. When I went there, it changed my life. And then the whole story of my art and how I was influenced began.
And perhaps the monk figures and Buddha, maybe you were influenced, you went to Ladakh, and perhaps that's how you incorporated them in your work, or?
Yes, like I told you, when I first went to Ladakh, I was just a tourist. But when you go to such a space where it is so vast, and and that time I'm talking about 2002 or 2003, when the first time, and the roads were also not good, and I was traveling on road. When I first went there, the vastness of nature that hits you. This beautiful landscape that you see in front of you, that sort of takes you. Like whenever you go to any place for the first time, look at the beauty of the place. So that's what I saw, and this whole vastness of nature made me feel that I'm so small. I don't. My existence is insignificant, kind. And these five elements of nature that we talk about, the Panchatattvas, it was throbbing out there. Like the air was so pristine, everything was so beautiful that I could feel those elements. And I started working on that. I didn't work on the monk figures then. That came much later, because I was more consumed by the nature, the beautiful environment. And I did a series of Tattva, like I told you. So the first series that I did when I went there was Tattva, the 5 elements of nature, and I worked on the 5 elements of nature. The monks came later on in my work.
And still, we see that in your work, not just the Panchatattva, but you are adhering or you are incorporating so many principles of Indian philosophy.
Yes, yes.
And for example, Prakriti and Purush.
Yes. So Ladakh I've been many times. So my first interaction was that I used to go there after 2 years or 1 year or so, and I would be inspired for another show. So like I told you, Purush, Prakriti came later on, but first time when I went to Ladakh, the nature was consumed me. I had a show called Tattva. Second time when I went, I started seeing the spaces around me, the voids. The barren landscape, the spaces which were there, which were barren, and suddenly you would have a force of red, as in a prayer flag, or a monk walking in. That's where the monk came in. So then I did a show called Shunya, the void, wherein it is not emptiness, it is throbbing with life, it's throbbing with the figures are coming out of it and going back to it. So this whole show was Shunya, where I explored the white spaces of Ladakh. Therein, when I went back again, that's when I started looking at the monasteries and the monks. I went inside the monasteries and I used to travel in the villages. So we used to stay in the villages and we used to travel there and we used to interact with people there. It was very difficult because first time when you go, they don't want to interact. They must have seen you after 3 months, they must have seen someone coming in, from the outside world, and they don't want any interference. So you have to be there, spend some time there, interact with them, and then after a few hours they'll start, talking to you. So that's the experience I had, and I went into the monasteries and I saw these beautiful frescoes, which were murals, which were done on the walls, which had a lot of gold, a lot of color, a lot of reds, and the chanting which used to take place. So I started incorporating the monk figures in my paintings. I started incorporating the chantings, the forms, the text. So I was not interested in the meaning of it, but the form interested me. So I used to place these forms in my paintings. You'll see it in my earlier works. So that's how, whatever I have experienced in my life has somehow translated onto the canvas. I did a show called Pratidhvani, the echo, that after the tattva, after the five elements, after a shunya, the void, you start hearing the echo. So that it was called Pratidhvani. So that's how my journey as an artist came. Purush Prakriti was always there in my work because I love to work on the masculine and the feminine energies. So that also came from the tankas, from the figures that I saw there in Ladakh.
It's really fascinating the way you have taken, wherever you go, you just take that and seamlessly make it a part of your composition. And here I'm also thinking of the beautiful patterns that your compositions carry. And those patterns, if you could tell us about your visits to, with your interactions with the weavers and various textiles, and how you just so beautifully blend them into your work.
Yeah, so my way of working is I have to travel. I cannot sit in a studio and work. I need to travel, I need to read, I need to interact with people where I go. And usually these travels are in the villages. They are not in urban landscapes, they are in very remote villages, into the weavers colony, even when I traveled to Leh, I was visiting the tanka makers and all. And from there I picked up certain elements. You'll see the clouds which are there in my works, the fish is there. They have symbolic meanings, the colors, the red and the golds in my earlier works, the texture that I have got. So you'll have these houses over there which have these gomfa mitti. So it's got a very raw texture. So I use this texture. Now about the weavers colony, after traveling to Ladakh for a number of times, I started exploring the other places on road and in India because I feel India lives in its villages and I wanted to see that. I wanted to see the tribal colonies, the weavers, the potters, like in Banaras and also in Bengal and in and around Rajasthan where you have the block printing. So you'll see these patterns, they come into my work. So I've always seen wherever I go and wherever I interact with people and I study about them, those things somehow they translate into my work.
That's really interesting because along with this composition, we can actually see that subtle energy seeping through your canvas. And that is what I think really makes your work very, very distinct because you feel that flow of energy and, you feel the painting trying to tell you something. Coming back to your series, let's talk about the Devi series. And I found that particularly interesting because when you are conceptualizing, visualizing and presenting Devi, the face, I was very taken aback with the face. Yes. It's not ornamented, it doesn't have jewelry, it doesn't have that complete feminine ideology. In fact, it's a face that could be very gender neutral. And it's surrounded by so many of the, elements, the natural elements. So, it could have been any face. It could be actually the face of a working woman. It could have been the face of a working person, irrespective of gender. What are your thoughts on this? I found it extremely fascinating.
Thank you, Jyoti. I'm so happy that you are actually saying what I had in mind when I was painting it. So Devi started. I was traveling to Bengal and I was traveling south. So over there, Shakti is the main form of worship, and I, being in Bengali, we believe in Shakti. We believe in Kali, Durga, and all. So Devi was something that fascinated me. We have this, the form of Devi, which we all know, all forms of Devi that is there, prevalent in Indian philosophy, in Indian ethos. So I wanted to depict Devi in my own way. And even if it was coming from the mythology and from the philosophy side of it, I was also very much influenced by the realities of and the situations that was around me. So I remember when I was doing Kali, I read an article in one of the newspapers in Bihar. There was a group of girls who refused to get married because the bridegrooms had demanded dowry. And it was so fascinating for me, because for me, a whole group of girls who have come from a village and from Bihar, and we know that, over there, how strong the whole community is, that you cannot talk openly and you cannot, voice your opinion openly. And over there, they were coming out with something like they were refusing, and it was not a loud protest, it was a very subtle and very silent kind of a protest. So for me, they were Kali, they were the revolution. That inspired Kali. And if you see the Kali that I have made, you cannot say it girl, because you said that it's a form which is staring directly at you, because I believe every person has the masculine and the feminine energies in it. So it's not gender specific, but it is a form which is staring at you, with all determination, fearlessly staring at you. And you have the Kali dancing over her head, you have the clouds, and that silent form of revolution was Kali to me. So I was trying and depicting that.
And you depicted it beautifully, I must say that.
Thank you.
So again, coming back to your paintings and their composition, there are some very, very beautifully done animals. For example, the Mriga series or the peacock, as you particularly, from your perspective, you draw it. And of course, when it comes to the human faces, they are more or less, as you said, they are very gender neutral, most of them. But when it comes to your depiction of flora and fauna, oh my God, it's like there's this spurt of color and energy that is coming out. Could you tell us about this?
Yes, I also need to tell you about the process that I do. I don't sketch or make a layout. I've never done it. In fact, in college, most of my professors used to always tell us, if you're doing a composition class, you should make a layout. And I used to say, no, I cannot make a layout. I have to do it directly, because whatever is here will come here and it will come out through my hand. So now when I work, I have these canvases on in front of me, and I paint abstract, just patches of color, because the whole philosophy of life, that whatever I am today, I'm Shampa, I'm a sum total of all the experiences that I've had. So when I'm painting on a canvas, I'm just putting patches of abstract color. I don't know what is going to come out of me. So these patches of color, then the forms that I have interacted or I have in my memory, those come in. Then the negative and the positive space, I just demarcate, and somehow the image forms. And you were talking about the animal forms. Now, if you see my earlier paintings, the animal forms always existed in my works, because I travel in these sectors, I travel in the jungles, I travel in the villages, I interact with the tribals. So the nature and the human and the animal, they all blend together. Nature is a part of their life. So I can understand, and that's why maybe it comes into my canvases. But what happened when we had the pandemic, that changed everything. The color palette and also my depiction of the animals. And when the pandemic was happening, we were confined to that small spaces, that small houses of ours, and the animals, the nature was blooming, and we were not there. And we were seeing the mountains from Chandigarh, we were seeing flamingos in Bombay, we were seeing rhinos on the street, we were seeing the elephants on the street, and it was as if, we were not needed. And it told us that how insignificant we are. Are we really needed here? Are we messing up things? Yes, we are. Our existence is messing up the whole ecosystem. So we saw that how nature bloomed in that. And that's when the Mriga or the Mayura or the Hansa, they all became the heroes of my canvases. They suddenly became bigger. And the men or the women or the gods and goddesses all became smaller, because this was what was important. And since I was also influenced by the miniature school of India, so you will see in the miniature paintings, anything and everything that is important to the artist suddenly is enlarged. So, I also started doing that, and my sense of perspective also became very weird. Like, I had the sky at the up, it was not that the general perspective that we talk about. It was also coming from the Indian miniatures, it was coming from the Indian folk arts, tribal arts. All this came into one, and that animal suddenly became big.
Yeah, you're totally right. Because during COVID times, the sheer insignificance of humanity came to the fore. And when we were looking at the roadside, there are these little flowers that are blooming, and you're hearing the sounds of birds that you'd never heard before. It's really intriguing how it impacted and, impacted your last solo, which is
Yes.
Prava.
Yes.
And I was like really impressed when I saw this show of yours. And you're right that you have the perspective with which you're looking at the flora and fauna is increased.
Yes.
But I would really be interested in two particular paintings of yours here, the Dasha Avatar and the Purush Prakriti, because there it seems as if suddenly there is something that you're trying to say here.
Yes.
And there is a very interesting mix of religion, philosophy, magic, and a complete worldview that I'm witnessing. So could you please tell us about it?
Yes. Look, Purush Prakriti, I've always done Purush Prakriti. And this time also, when I was doing Purush Prakriti, it was very much a part of the journey that I was taking. If you see my Purusha, you'll see him amidst these banana plantations. So actually, a very interesting thing happened. I was traveling to south, my car had stopped somewhere. Then suddenly, you have these cultivated land. On the periphery, you have these huge banana plantations. Suddenly, out of that, in that, I think so, it was about 1 o'clock or so in the afternoon, this man suddenly comes out, from the banana plantation. He must be working in his field, and he's suddenly there and all tanned. And when I was making Purusha, that vision remained with me. So to me, he was Purush, he was a creator. He was the one who was giving, and he was surrounded by these banana plantations. So I think so that vision of Purusha remained with me. And Prakriti, again, when I was making Prakriti, I was in Bengal and I was with the Rabha tribes. There's a tribe in Bengal called the Rabha. So I was talking to this Rabha, the tribal man, uneducated person, and we were having a conversation. So when I was talking to him, I just told him, I was being very angry, and I said, ये जो जंगल है, इससे आप लोग सब लेते हो, मतलब पेड़ काट रहे हो, you're taking everything from the forest. So this man, he looks at me and says, हाँ दीदी, हम तो जंगल से सब कुछ लेते हैं, पेड़ पौधे काटते हैं, पत्तियाँ लेते हैं, जो महुआ के फूल है वो भी लेते हैं, फल भी लेते हैं, then the roots, we take that, boil it and we eat it. दवाइयाँ जो है वो भी हमारी जंगल से आती है. And he stopped for a while and he said a beautiful thing. He said, वो माँ है ना, वो तो देगी. That one word, that the forest is my mother. Me, I'm coming from an urban setup. My schooling has been in Bombay, I've been in Delhi all my life, and I refer to the forest that, the forest or the jungle. But for him, it was his mother. And how beautifully these tribals, how beautifully the nature coexisted in their lives. So look at the beautiful relationship they have with the forest. And it was so beautiful. So when I was making Prakriti, you'll see Prakriti, she has her hands outstretched, and as if, she is giving everything, all her energies to you. And under her, you have the forest, the tiger, the elephant, everything is secure. Everything is in harmony. So I felt that, if I have to represent my Prakriti, I have to do it in this way. So that's where the story of the Purush and the Prakriti came. And the Dashavatar that you were saying, yes, this is the first time that for Prava, I've done the Dashavatar. Now Prava, again, as I told you, it's the flow. Now the flow can be flow of energy, it can be the flow of life, it can also be the flow of my journey of life. So whatever I have experienced till date as an artist and as a traveler, I've tried to put in Prava. So you will have these, those patches of weavers, those embroideries, or you will have the Tanka paintings influence clouds and the fishes and the lotuses. You will have the animal figures coming in. And the Dashavatar, I wanted to do it because in the Dashavatar, even if it is very scientific and it comes from the Darwinian philosophy of evolution, but it was there in our Puranas, like I told you. And over here also, you see such a beautiful mix of nature, man and the animal. So when you're having the life coming from the waters, the Matsya, and then you have the amphibian, which is the Kurma, and then you have the Varaha, okay, and then you have the Narsimha, which is again half man, half animal, something like a caveman kind of a thing, where it's half man, half animal. And then you come down to Vamana, the dwarf man, and then to the Parshuram, where again he's trying to become the best possible Purusha, but he's still not, he's lacking because his emotions are not in his control. He's a very violent person, but again he's trying to strike a balance. And after Parshuram, you have Rama, which is the Maryada Purushottam. Now, Maryada Purushottam, he is perfect in every way, but then again, you have the golden deer. You have the desires and the aspirations that he's chasing the golden deer, and that's how Ravana takes Sita, and you know the story. So we also in our life, we are chasing the golden deer, we are aspiring for everything, and we are just running around, and the more closer we get, the further away it gets from us. And after Rama, you have Balaram. Now, Balaram again, he is the elder brother of Krishna, but again, he has his, he's also trying to balance out his life. And then you have Krishna, who's the epitome of everything. And then Kalki. I've depicted Kalki on a horse with a sword, and I had many interactions, with people. So one of them came and said that, she looks like a Roman goddess. So I said, yeah, but I've not put any gender specific this, but yes, now that you tell me, I feel she looks like a Roman goddess. So this whole series of Dashavatar is again how nature, man, and animal, they coexist. And it's been like this for ages. Our Indian philosophy has always taught us that over the ages.
Absolutely, you're right. We were already into that.
Into that.
And somewhere I think we need to be reminded, and your Prava does it so beautifully. This whole exhibition has got, as I must remark about this, a very interesting cosmic movement as against the day-to-day movement. Yes. And it's sort of reimagining the world full of magic, the sacred, it's got myths, it's got very important aspects of the nature, and are very beautifully and holistically combined with human figures. And that's what I found really interesting about Prava.
Yes.
But there was one more very interesting thing, which is your huge sculpture. Before sculpture, I also want to ask you about your acrylic, the composition and your preference for acrylic. So these are the two things I want to ask you.
Yes.
First, how is acrylic your preferred medium? And also, how did you venture into huge sculptures?
Look, when I was in my B.F.A, we were working in all mediums. Oil was there, watercolor was there, acrylic was there, but acrylic was not so prevalent at that time. But I realized that, my way of working is very spontaneous, and I really don't have the patience and the energy for the oil painting to dry and, then put the next layer. So I work in layers. You must have seen. So what I like about acrylic is that it can be thick, it can be textured, it can have a wash, it can be again, used in strokes, small strokes, it can be again textured with a roller or a spatula or something, and the best part is it's fast drying. So it suits my temperament of working, my way of working, because when I work, I don't think so much. When I listen to people interpreting my paintings, and when they talk so much about my painting that, Shampa, this is what we feel when we see your work, or this is how it affects us, I don't think so much when I'm working, because all that thought and all that has happened way back when I was traveling and reading. But when I'm working, it has to be very fast, because I work very spontaneously. So acrylic perfectly suits that medium, my way of working. Secondly, it was the sculptures that you were saying. Now, sculptures in 2019, when I had a show with one of the galleries, and it was a collateral to the art fair. So there also I had made sculptures, but I had not made them at this scale. There were small sculptures. I was just beginning, because what I wanted essentially was that I had a lot of elements, a lot of symbols in my paintings, and symbols have a silent language of their own, which draws me towards them. So they like when I make a fish, or when I make the swan. Now the fish is, again, if you just understand, fish is free to swim in the waters, but it has a direction. It is not aimlessly wandering around, and it also has a symbolic meaning. It is fertile. It's denoting fertility, but fish has a direction of a sense of motion. If I'm drawing the lotus, again, lotus is again blooming of your inner soul, of your inner self. So everything that I do, the elements that I do, I wanted it to come out of the canvas in a 3D format. So in my 2019 show, I had done the Hansa in a small format, and the head, which you see in this show, but they were all in a small format. This time when I did a painting on Prakriti, there's a painting where I'm making this head of Prakriti, and that sort of has everything in it, you know. It's as if the whole jungle, a whole forest is living in that head. So I wanted to get out Prakriti in a 3D format. So, and I wanted it to be huge because I wanted people who are coming into the show actually to be invited by Prakriti to come in and be with her and experience the show. So that's why that large format. And I'm not a sculptor. End of the day, I'm a painter. So I was not very comfortable in working with wax. So I didn't make a bronze sculpture. I made it in clay because it was easier for me to sculpt. And I made a fiber, you know, and I thought that why should I place a fiber material in middle of the show when I'm talking about Indian aesthetics and I'm talking about philosophy, I'm talking about, you know, nature. So I said, let me make it, give it a texture of bronze, because the whole philosophy of, you know, coming from the dust and going back to the dust, that nothing is going to remain here. So I made it in a bronze texture, and this huge head of Prakriti, when you enter the exhibition, it is as if it is welcoming you inside the exhibition, that come and experience me, come and see me. There was another sculpture there which was the bull, the Nandi. I made it because I was making Purush Prakriti. So I wanted to make the Vahana because Nandi is very essential. It is the mount of Shiva. In fact, it is Shiva himself or the Purusha himself. So there again I felt that, you know, how beautiful that even the Vahanas of the god has the animal forms in it. You know, even the gods cannot do without the nature or the Prakriti. And how beautifully, even in our mythology, in our Indian philosophy, how beautifully the gods, the animals, the plants and nature and everything combines and becomes a, you know, a beautiful whole. So that's why both the sculptures I've made, the Nandi, which I've placed in front of the Purush Prakriti, and of course the Prakriti which welcomes you to the exhibition.
Yes, and of course the softer hues, which are the
Yes,
hallmark of this
yes,
particular.
yes. I was so happy, Jyoti, that Anjali Ila Menon ma'am came, and I am a big fan of her work. And I've been, in fact, we've all been seeing her works. And when we were students, these were some of the Indian artists who influenced you, you know. We saw their works in the NGMA. We used to study their work. And when she came in, and she said a very beautiful thing. She said, the pastel colors that you use, Shampa, I cannot think of another artist using it. And that was a big compliment. And it did happen to me because if you see my earlier works, they have very bright colors.
Yes.
In fact, the basic colors, if you see my Tattva show, there was a comment from one of the art critics that she uses the basic colors very well. Because I think so at that time, my whole vision was, you know, it was not in depth. And as and when my painting started evolving, and as and when my journey, you know, it was happening, and the COVID happened, so I think so it mellows you down, you know, you become more patient to allow that flow to happen, to allow things to happen. So that's what happened, you know, maybe everything mellowed down, and so did my color palette.
So I'm going to ask you, what is art to you?
Look, art to me is actually, it's a journey, and that journey involves my interaction, my study, my going out and being there and interacting with people, experiencing life, and then whatever I have experienced out of that comes out as my art, my language on the canvas. So this journey is art to me, in the physical form of the journey and also the visual form which comes out as art. Anything and everything that has influenced my life is a part of that journey, is a part of that art.
And finally, a few words about Chaibrary.
First of all, a big thank you to you and the whole team for inviting me here. What I like about this is, you know, the stories that you tell. That is very important because we know the art, or you have so many people, like you have performers, you have photographers, you have everyone from different art fields, you know, being there. But the stories behind it, that documentation is so important. Like, I know an artist who is my contemporary or who is my senior. I've seen their work. I'm well versed with the work. But the story that goes into making that happen is what Chaibrary is doing. And that documentation is so important for now and for the generations to come. And it is there on the social media, it is there on the public domain, and it is for everyone to see. So this documentation is very important, and I think so hats off to the whole team and you, that, you know, you're doing it so well. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Shampa, for being with us.
Thank you.
And it's been very illuminating talking with you, and I cannot express my gratitude enough. With that, we come to the end of this edition of Chaibrary. Do like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please press the bell icon for latest updates. We thank you for your love and support. This is Jyoti Kathpalia signing off the sets of Chaibrary. Until next time, bye-bye and namaskar.